Welcome to Mr. Biz Radio, Biz Talk for biz owners. During the next half hour, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth, a leading business advisor and two-time best-selling author, will cover topics that'll help business owners run their companies more profitably and more efficiently. If you're ready to stop faking the funk and take your business onward and upward, this show is for you. And now, here's Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth.
All right, welcome to another episode of Mr. Biz Radio with me, Mr. Biz, Ken Wentworth. And we're talking about a very important topic for all of us, even if you're not a business owner, even if you're, maybe you're not even an entrepreneur. This is something that's very important, communication. Communication is very important, and we're going to take it a little bit of a different angle. So, of course, we've talked about communication on the show before, but we have our guest this week who's an expert at kind of looking at things from a little bit of a different lens in regards to communication. And I think it'll be very helpful for us. Our guest this week is Miss Catherine Mattiske. And why is it that no matter how much training businesses provide, teams still seem to fall apart when it comes to communication? We've seen this especially during the pandemic and when things had to go virtual and people weren't coming into the office on a regular basis. As I mentioned, our guest today is Catherine Mattiske. She's the founder of TPC, which stands for the Performance Company. With Inner Genius, she is showing us how to communicate based on specific inner genius archetype. Why is it, Catherine, that communication seems to break down so often with teams?
I think there's a simple answer, Ken. It's because we're human. Communication breaks down with teams. It breaks down in shopping centres. It breaks down in families. It breaks down in relationships. I think it is part of the human condition.
I think you're right, unfortunately. Yeah, I mean, it's just, like you said, it's kind of human nature to some extent. I guess I kind of dove in a little bit fast there. If you would, Catherine, walk us through a little bit some of your background and how you've gotten to be this inner genius at this point, and sort of your background in building up to that.
Well, I can't say I had much of a strategy. I grew up with an entrepreneurial father before the term entrepreneur was even invented. And so that was my household, discussing business and the family business around the dinner table when I was a tiny little girl. And so it kind of made sense that when I went into corporate life, it didn't really fit for me because I'd never grown up in that circumstance where my dad had a 9-to-5 job. So I did the whole corporate thing for a while and then thought, I'll go and do my own thing for a while I find another real job. Well, that decision was 28 years ago. So I started my business 28 years ago and I never did find that real job. So I grew up in the computer industry and I was teaching people how to do Microsoft Word, Excel, PowerPoint in the very early days of the PC industry. I've now aged myself terribly. But one thing I noticed was that there were some people that were success seekers. There were people that would come into my training room and want to embrace this whole new technology. And there were other people who were on the other end of the spectrum and they were completely fearful. And I started to think about how can I make more of those people that wanted success. And now, after a life's work in learning science and looking at how people learn and how that directly influences how people communicate and how people connect with other people, that's where I am right now.
So, excuse me, would you say, Catherine, that it's sort of just been an evolution for you? So you've learned this over the years and kind of developed this inner genius archetype?
Yeah, absolutely. And up until I wrote the book, Unlock Inner Genius, that was the first time, which was only, months ago, that I had ever embarked on what I refer to as the everyone market in the world. I have been deep inside very large corporates, global brands for my whole career, restructuring how their learning and development functions work, and writing training courses for them to go on and deploy. So the stumbled business it's really been an evolution to say, okay, what have I learned that works in a company of 100,000 people, how can that work for the solopreneur? How can that work for someone with the spark of an idea for a business? How can that work for a parent? How can that work for any of us who say, you know, I went to a meeting and I had a great idea and I was ignored and somebody else had that idea. And then everyone said, oh, that's a fabulous idea. And I was sitting there thinking, I had that idea, you know, half an hour ago. So all sorts of issues around communication, that's been the kind of culmination of my entire life's work.
It's interesting because, you know, in my corporate career, I worked at JP Morgan. So, you know, at the time we had 260,000 employees. And then now, you know, after I left the corporate world and working with folks, you know, that have 5 employees, 10 employees, 100 employees, maybe 200 or 300 employees, still way different than 260,000. So I think it's interesting you're able to boil that down. And clearly there are some things that are common, whether you're at a huge company or, as you mentioned, maybe just even a solopreneur.
Yeah, exactly. Because at the end of the day, we're either talking to one person or a group of people. And that group of people can be 2 people. That group of people can be 100,000 people. That group of people can be the entire JP Morgan organization. It can be, you know, whatever the number is. But at the end of the day, it's the same thing. You're either talking to an individual or a group. And it doesn't matter who they are in your life. That's really the pattern. And if you can crack that code, which I've done, to say, how can I do that better? How can I do that more efficiently? How can I do that so people listen to me, get it? I can connect with them. I can influence them. That's the secret sauce. And then you take that into your life and things start to smooth out a little.
I love it. I love it. Well, we don't have too much time left in the segment, but I've got a question I want to ask you about your career. What would you look back, as you look back, what is the most important career lesson you would say that you've learned, Catherine?
I think the resilience part is number one. I've had my own business for 28 years. I can tell you at times it's felt like a roller coaster. At times I've been sitting on the couch, I want to give up. And you think, if I stay here, it feels safe and lovely. And the resilience part is to say, remember why you did this in the first place and get up off the couch and get back to it. And sometimes I just sit at my computer and kind of make out I'm doing work, because I think, okay, if I can just make out I'm doing work, I can actually get something done. And it's those rough times. And everyone talks about the sweet times. Everyone talks about the highs. I met this person, I did this. But you know what? It's the resilience for me in those really low times.
Yeah, I think that's a great one. And I think, you know, as I mentor folks now, you know, to your point about resilience, and I call it something a little bit different. I call it consistent perseverance, which is essentially the same sort of thing. Is if you don't have that trait in spades, you probably won't be a successful entrepreneur, business owner, because no matter how smart you are, no matter who you know, all that good stuff, you have to have that, because you will get knocked down. There are going to be challenges. There'll be bumps in the roads, things that you didn't anticipate. So you have to be able to have resilience and consistent perseverance to be successful, especially over 28 years. Clearly, you have those traits and have done those well. So again, this week we're talking with Catherine Mattiske. You can find out more at innergeniusnow.com. Come back after the break. We'll give the Mr. Biz tip of the week, and we're going to find out more about inner genius archetypes.
Business owners have a continually growing to-do list with little time for revenue-producing activities. With Check Off Your List and their experienced team of virtual assistants, you can focus on growing your business. Visit checkoffyourlist.com to learn how Check Off Your List's skilled team can handle your day-to-day tasks like social media, bookkeeping, calendar maintenance, and much more. Contact Check Off Your List at checkoffyourlist.com or call 888-262-1249 to see how their virtual assistants can help you live to work rather than work to live.
Thank you for listening to Mr. Biz Radio. Did you know our show airs 7 days a week for more than 30 hours now? If you are in the B2B space and would like to reach thousands of business owners every week, including our more than 250,000 social media followers, our thousands of daily internet radio listeners, our email list fans, and Mr. Biz Solutions members, email us at info@MrBizSolutions.com to become a sponsor. Tap into Mr. Biz Nation to help grow your business.
Check out both of Mr. Biz's national best-selling books, Pathway to Profits and How to Be a Cash Flow Pro on Amazon. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. And as we do always at the top of the second segment, we give the Mr. Biz tip of the week. And if you want to follow along with those, you can follow me on social media, Instagram, YouTube, Facebook, LinkedIn, all those good things, Twitter, where we share our tips every week. But this one is actually a quote from, I mentioned him before on the show, but Jesse Itzler, I'm a big fan of his. And his quote is, it's kind of a three-part advice. And he says to look through the windshield, not the rearview mirror. Make sure you celebrate wins, even small wins. And finally, you have to take care of yourself because, as Jesse puts it, the life bus doesn't care if you get sick. So especially as a business owner, and really especially if you're a solopreneur, you got to make sure you're taking care of yourself. Don't disregard your own health and wellness because it's extremely important. And if you're a solopreneur and you get sick, what's going to happen to your business? If you are the person, you got to make sure that you're doing those things. So very important. If you don't follow Jesse Itzler, I would strongly recommend that as well as following our guest this week, Catherine Mattiske. You can follow her on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram, and find out more on her website, innergeniusnow.com. So Catherine, let's get back into this. So I kind of mentioned it a little bit in the first segment, but you have this thing you call Inner Genius, and there are Inner Genius archetypes, obviously, that you've formulated and learned about over the years throughout your 28 years as a business owner and learning from folks. So what are those archetypes and how can identifying those, help people?
Yeah, so coming back a step, you've all heard of IQ, and that was developed in 1912. And that was developed by a guy by the name of William Stern. Like, who knows that? And we all know that. And then there was EQ in the 1990s. And that's all about that emotional intelligence. And then I developed GQ, the Genius Quotient, in 2021. And part of the foundation of that is, as you said, around the archetypes. So we all have a preferred way of learning. And so I've created 12 different archetypes to describe that preference that we all have of learning. And the first thing to do is to find out what archetype you are. So for example, there's some people who connect really, really well with other people. They're always asking the why questions. They're the storytellers. They're the people who are inquisitive. And then there's other people who are the detail people. They are right down in the weeds. They're getting information. They're turning that into something else. And then there's other people that say, forget all that. Just let me at it. I want to do it. They're into the construction of things. They're methodical. They're the people who like to get practical and get solutions. And then there's other people like me who are the inventors. And they're people that want to see the future. They're about visioning. They're about the cheerleaders. They are the people who are all about innovation. And often those people mix well, but often they don't. And so these archetypes, for example, you could be a futurist, which is one of those visioning people. And futurists have a language all of their own. And when a futurist speaks, and a lot of entrepreneurs kind of fit into this inventing category, whether they're futurists or energizers or explorers, that's 3 different archetypes in that category. And those people are all about the big ideas. Their brain is racing. And then other people who are all about the detail, they might be an archetype that I call the horologist. So they're saying, hang on, what do you want me to do here? What is the detail around this? What's the practicalities? I need to make that process efficient. And the futurist says, oh, forget about all that. Let's just think about the ideas and let's brainstorm that. And then someone else comes in, like the cartographer, who's all about the methodical, let's get the structure, let's get doing it, let's step it out, let's test and learn, says, okay, slow down. And the futurist is there going, why do these people inhibit me? All I've got is these great ideas, and you people, you're holding me back. I'll do it myself. You're all too slow. I'll do it myself. It's classic. Once you know that people are different to you, you can then talk in their language, just the same as if you grew up in France, you're speaking French. If you grew up in Germany, you're speaking German. It's the same thing. Archetypes who are different, it's like speaking different languages. So if I grew up in Germany and I've got to learn French, then bang, I learn it. If I'm a futurist archetype and I'm working with the horologist, I need to learn the horologist's language. Once I do that, the horologist says, wow, she's just like me. She gets me. She understands me. And I don't necessarily. I can just speak their language.
Well, I think I love it. I think it's super important because, someone like the late Steve Jobs, being the visionary that he was, he needs people around. And I think it's good too. And we'll talk about this a little bit more, I think, as we get into the third segment, but being able to use those archetypes as well to build a team. You don't want all visionaries on a team, or you'll never get anything done, right?
A disaster.
And I've talked about that before is, if Steve Jobs didn't have Steve Wozniak, who was the doer, who was, let me take your vision and let me put it in practicality. Let me get this done. If Steve Jobs is just running off and surrounded himself with other Steve Jobs visionaries, who knows what would have happened, right? There wouldn't be execution wouldn't happen, right? If Wozniak didn't have Steve Jobs, he may have never been successful because he doesn't have the vision. He can get stuff done. He's an executioner, but he's doesn't have that vision. So I love the fact of sort of melding those two and making sure that the different archetypes recognize them and being able to speak the language, I think is very important. Otherwise, it's probably a lot of frustration.
Well, miscommunication, dysfunctional teams, the list goes on and on. And for an entrepreneur, we're talking about missed sales opportunities because you might be talking to a customer who's completely different to you, or a group of people. How do you then send one communication out via email or a newsletter and hook in all 12 archetypes? You're only one. So how do you do that? So that's the problem that I've solved. And I've created a toolkit to do this. Follow the tools, use the tools, bang, done. So it is a whole new world. It's a new world of communication for people. And they go, oh my goodness, I can do this. I'm much more confident. I'm a better presenter. All of this feedback's coming back to me. That is pretty rewarding, I've got to say.
Well, I can imagine. And especially with the pandemic, and especially as the business world has become more and more virtual, right? That adds a whole nother communication layer to it, to where maybe you don't see someone and maybe they're on a Zoom and they've got their camera off. So you don't get the nonverbal, right? And so then how do you also mix that in? Not only the language you're using, the semantics, et cetera, but the nonverbal, because you can't see them. So how do you do that? This is a fascinating topic. And I'm sure I want to hold off because I know we're going to talk about some of the keys to successful communication, because we're kind of scratching the surface on that. But I want to really dive into that during the next segment, because I think this is going to be revolutionary for everyone listening. And you can use it in your personal life as well. I know you talked about that a little bit, Catherine, in the first segment. But so come back after the break. We're going to continue talking with Catherine Mattiske. You can find out more at innergeniusnow.com.
Are you ready to automate your business? Automation is the key to scaling a business and building wealth. It's also one of the most difficult things for a small business owner to do on their own. If you're looking for help with automation, Pulse Technology CRM can help. We have an exclusive offer for Mr. Biz Nation. We will build everything for free, even if it's a sophisticated funnel. Visit thepulsespot.com/Mr. Biz for this exclusive offer.
If you find listening to Mr. Biz Radio is helpful, imagine having live access to not only Mr. Biz, but also 5 other trusted business experts. It's true. You can have live access to your very own CFO, plus a business attorney, a website and digital marketing expert, a sales and growth guru, a financing professional, and a customer experience master. Visit MrBizSolutions.com to learn more. Join Mr. Biz Nation at MrBizSolutions.com.
To submit questions to the show, email them to info@MrBizSolutions.com. Now, once again, here's Mr. Biz.
All right, welcome back to the show. I want to dive into this because I know Catherine's got a lot to share, and I know this is going to be very impactful for all of us because, as she alluded to, I know I mentioned a little bit as well. These are things that can work not only as a business owner, not only as an entrepreneur, but in your personal life. Realizing that some of your friends and family that you interact with on a regular basis have these different intergenious archetypes, and you may have a particular family member. I might be able to think of one or two myself. That are probably a different archetype than myself. And so that leads to frustration, as Catherine mentioned. So Catherine, tell us, in your experience, what are some of the keys to successful communication?
The first key is to work out your archetype. And then there's the vast realization that probably everyone around you is different to you. That insight into yourself is the absolute foundation stone, because without that, it's really hard to get moving and get on with a whole new skill set. The other thing is to recognize that it is a skill. This whole idea of communicating a different way is a new skill. We've been communicating our way in our preferred archetype completely subconsciously for our entire lives. It doesn't change from when you're little children to when you're adults. It's your way of communicating. And once you tune into other people's way of communicating, you can then really start to create what I refer to as a translation bridge between one person and the other. And that builds a connection. The very first thing to build between someone that is different to you is a connection. Now, that doesn't matter whether it's that family member that's getting on your nerves, whether it's a friend that you go, you know what, I'm so frustrated with that person, I'm going to just cut off them, I can't be bothered with them anymore. Whether it's somebody at work in your team, whether if you're working for an organization, it's your boss, whoever it is, a supplier, a customer, whatever. The key thing is, once you've worked out how you learn, is to build that bridge of connection. Find something in common. Now, you might say, I have nothing in common with this person who is completely annoying you. Guess what? There is always something in common. That person, if you think of that person as being not difficult, but different to you, then that's the beginning of the bridge. And really amp up your listening. Did you know that people talk at about 150 words a minute, but we listen at about 450 words a minute? So there's a lot of airtime in there for people to drift, do something different with their mind, and not be listening to you. So by building that connection, you're building up that opportunity for yourself to listen to someone else and for them to listen to you. And then it's about communicating. How do you then structure your communication, written, spoken, presenting, whatever it is, one-on-one to a group that hooks in that person, that individual, or that group of people, where they feel like you're speaking their language. And you're doing that in a very constructed, skillful way. So I happen to be the archetype of a futurist. And when I talk to other futurists, we're great together because we talk the same language, don't have to do anything. But when I talk to another archetype, someone like the scribe, for example, that's my opposite. That's my complete, as far as I can get away from myself. And so how do I construct that language and use words in my email, which I give to you? Use these words when you're talking to someone who's your opposite. Use these words to talk to somebody who's close to you, but they're not you. Use these words in this structure to create a balanced communication. It's a new skill set. Does it take a while to learn? Yep, some things are really fast, but then other things are a skill that you have to hone. At the end of this, the goal is that you become more influential. People who are on that Times top 100 list of great influencers in the world are great communicators every time. And they're great communicators, and we feel like we know them. We feel like from the last list, which was 2021, we feel like we know Billie Eilish. We don't. We feel like we know Prince Harry and Meghan. We don't. Well, I don't. We feel like we, know all these people, but we don't. But what is it about them that makes them those great communicators? It's because they can do this.
Yeah, and I think it's critical. And I would imagine too, I know back in my corporate days, as I was assembling a team, or as for example, someone on my leadership team would leave. They'd go on to be promoted, they'd go on a different job. I think so often what happens is we seek, and I love your opinion on this, is oftentimes we seek people that are like us, probably because they speak our language, right? Our archetype language. And so if you're a visionary, if you're a futurist, when you go to hire someone, you're going to automatically be drawn more towards another futurist. Right. However, to build a strong, diverse team, and I mean diverse personality wise, not necessarily background or gender or anything like that. It's very important, I think, for leaders to be self-aware of some of these things and how critical knowing these archetypes and knowing that I've got a leadership team of 8 people and what are one of the archetype gaps that we have. I think that would be critical to building a really strong team. Is that your experience?
Absolutely. And I created a tool called the Team Map for exactly that purpose, so that you can see where those gaps are. And it is the ultimate in diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging, because you are saying that we are not just talking the talk about diversity and belonging and inclusion, we're actually putting it on the ground to say, how do we create an inclusive group of people that we can respect and communicate in their way and the way they like to work for their optimum efficiency and their optimum ability to get into their expert zone? How can we do that? And when you do that team map and you look at your team, you might have a very unbalanced team and you go, oh, okay, how do I work with that? Well, you kind of know who your next hire might be and the kind of things to look for in interviews. But then you might also say, okay, we need to backfill. We need someone who's in the detail, and we don't have that right now. So we can all go into those spaces, but it's not our expert zone. The key to success is to keep everybody working in their archetype, because that's their expert zone. My expert zone is dreaming up new ideas. My expert zone is creating a future. Can I do the detail? Absolutely. But I struggle, and it's slow and it's awful. So we help people to get into their expert zone and stay there. And even when you're doing work that's not in your expert zone, we give you a Spotify playlist for your archetype that helps you to bridge that gap. So you crank up that Spotify playlist. And for me, if I'm deep in Excel or doing detailed work, that's what I put on, because I go, okay, this is not my gig, but I'll make it an environment that I can really hone into.
Catherine, I got to tell you, the reason I was chuckling a little bit when you just said that playlist. So I'm a big music person. I listen to music all the time. And I literally have, one very specific example I have is that I hate compiling all the work for my taxes. I hate it. Even though my undergrad's in accounting and I'm a numbers nerd, I hate it. And I have a playlist that I listen to when I have to do that, because I know that it'll keep me focused. Yeah. So I can definitely relate to that. Catherine, we're out of time here, but go out again, guys. Go to intergeniusnow.com. You can find out more there. Follow her on Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, and Instagram. Catherine, thank you so much for being on Mr. Biz Radio. I really appreciate it.
It's great to be with you.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. Guys, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. Have a great week. And don't forget, as always, cash flow is king.
This has been Mr. Biz Radio. To learn how to become part of Mr. Biz Nation, visit MrBizSolutions.com. For access to free weekly content, subscribe to the Mr. Biz YouTube channel and follow him on Facebook, LinkedIn, Instagram, and Twitter. To listen to archive shows, you can find them on the Mr. Biz Solutions website.